Stop in your tracks, I told myself, because my podcast is all about chronic health and mental health issues. Nah, it's more than that. You see, you as an individual have got a mind, a body, and a spirit. You are here to make a difference to the people, to the planet, in very humble form or in a massive way. However, you've been lied to, you've been deceived, you've been manipulated for most of your life through the misuse of words, through misuse of language. Any kind of words other than of and the and any kind of words will have an impact on you, either a positive one or a negative one. You see, most of the times the decisions we make in our lives are driven by subconscious programming. Those who choose to manipulate you are going to tap into that subconscious programming. On this particular episode of the Harun Rabbani podcast, I am discussing with Safana, who is a copywriter, a professional who uses the power of language to influence decision making. Well, she's joining me and we are going to be talking about the power of language. But the context is this: currently at the time of recording, we are going through the general elections. And even after that, you're going to be making decisions. But the question is, are you going to be the one responsible for making your decisions? Or are you going to be misled by others? Words can create health freedom. Words can create mental and emotional slavery. Enjoy this episode where I interview Safana about the power of language.
The problem then comes when, again, we see our country acting as a baddie, portraying itself as a goodie in as many words as it can by concealing some things. But as you've mentioned, the mask has come off because they're just trying to get a reaction out of you. And again, if we're using the framework of like that we've been seen before, it's not my framework. It's just, how do you uphold justice? The first is you do an action. The second is you speak about it.
Can you give a quick breakdown about what you do, why you do it, meaning copywriting, and why it's relevant to the conversation we are about to have?
The why I do it is a big question, but what I do is I am on the tin a copywriter. Really and truly what I am is like a comms specialist, because copywriting is quite a strict profession in that you have to focus on the language that is used for any product or service or whatever it might be, to communicate to the customer, the user, whatever, the benefits of the product, really, and why it's useful to them. So that's copywriting, and that's the discipline. Broader than that, like the reason I say I'm a comms specialist is because I don't only write it, I can assess it and I can teach it. And that's writing in strictly all of the communications forms, whether that's like internal communications for a business, whether that's like assessing the way power structure is perpetuated in some kind of non-government organization and giving you feedback, etc., or teaching your team exactly how to communicate your point as a business. So my job really is to understand how language is perceived and then be able to teach that or communicate that to a team, should that be the most sustainable way to keep that message going in that business. Why I do it, I hope that makes sense. Basically, I know words well. Somewhat. I say as I struggle for the next one. Why I do it, I stumbled across it in the most organic way, I would say, throughout my career, which has been 10 years in marketing and media and all things communications. And I found it to be a wonderful blend of science and art, really and truly. Like, and as a mathematician, it piques my curiosity endlessly, and there's always stuff to learn. So it's a combination of understanding like human psychology and then the impact a simple verb or noun can have when fixed to something in a sentence, and how that impacts human behavior. And putting it together means I get to be a copywriter.
It's fascinating, the power of language, and we don't at school we don't get taught.
Yeah,
we get taught languages, of course, but we don't get taught about the impact of how words are put together, how it makes such a difference, I should say. Our perceptions, of course, are shaped by language. How influential is language in shaping public opinion and perception, whether it be at a local level or international level?
it's difficult to overstate how powerful it is. So I think another way of saying that is, what else do you have to understand the world, is really the question that I would ask. So rather than asking like how impactful is it, is really what other tool do you have apart from genuinely images? And those images have to be coupled with words. And those words are very carefully curated for you, depending on where you are in the world. Yeah, my question to you is, what else do you have apart from the image? What else do you have if, for example, like very simple case scenario, if you've never been to China, apart from hearing about China and looking at photos of China, if you take the photos to the side, what else do you have? To conjure up the image, to understand the culture, to do you see what I mean? Like there's no other tool that you have to pick apart a notion that you can't experience firsthand. So therefore necessarily it is the way you experience the world. Therefore necessarily it has power over you.
Our brain thinks as images, doesn't it? I remember growing up, adverts like, and if I've asked any audience members, anybody listening or watching the podcast right now, if I say a Mars a day, and this might be a generational thing, a Mars a day, people of a certain generation will say, help you work, rest, and place. Have a break, have a Kit Kat. So words have significant. It conjures up, not just for me anyway, not just conjures up images, it also conjures up feelings as well. So, for example, the chocolate bounty, the advert used to be, and it will be totally banned nowadays and totally not PC, which is about bounty, the taste of paradise, because all the imagery used to be of a desert island, and back in the day, it would be semi-clad woman coming out of the water, eating a bounty. It was actually highly sexualized, to be honest, the 70s and 80s, which they would not get away with today. So you're in the advertising world, communication world. How are words crafted in a way that it impacts on a particular subject? So let's just get into it, because right now there's a lot going on. My interest was piqued based on what you were talking about, the propaganda related to Palestine. But let's talk about perceptions and how language can impact the perception of people have of a certain situation or any particular product.
A really good way to think about it is that there's a reason I buy things different to the way someone else would buy something. And there's a reason that my, let's say, For You page on TikTok looks different to your For You page. There is a science behind who is targeted with which advert based on their interest, based on their history, based, like as in search history, based on the people that they follow and things that they ascribe to and keywords that they've searched and all of this stuff. There's a literal science to it. Like so it's not to be taken lightly that you get to see an advert. Most of the time it has been crafted specifically to get you to do something, and that's because it costs money. A lot of the times if you follow the money, you'll understand people's intention behind what they wanted you to do. And that was one of the reasons I made the TikToks that I made. As someone who used to put budget behind a specific image with some kind of demographic targeting, if you were to follow the money, you'd understand that there's ill intention. Like it's not like, oh, it's just a objective value statement that there's just a silly amount of money being spent to warp your perception of what we now are coming to terms with being called a genocide. So, like globally. All this to say that when we talk about how products perceive you, or people who want to sell a product perceive you, they know you down to what is called a persona. So the way I like to say this to people is, chances are, no matter who you are, there is a version of you on a slideshow in some person's like media presentation or marketing presentation, specifying your age, your postcode, your income, all of this stuff, and probably something about you that informs them of what verbs make you do what nouns make you do what. So language is much more than just buy this now, all of this stuff. There's a reason you see what you see. That's the best way to put it. There's a reason the nouns have been chosen for you, and it's based on a good, usually thorough understanding of you. If these people are doing their job correctly, which they're making enough money to assume that they are. So yeah, that's what I would say. It's your job then to discern how come you see that advert and how come your dad doesn't, or how come your dad sees a slightly different version of the same advert for the same product, right? So it's stuff like that. It's a science, and it's down to understanding you and what makes you act, because they're just trying to get a reaction out of you.
There's a company about 10 years ago, I was researching, I was fascinated by them. The company were hiring only PhD in mathematics, and this was to understand algorithms. And this company was doing exceptionally well, really, really well, until 2016. And in 2016, I knew of this company, like I said, a while back. I thought, uh-oh. I was posting, I said to people, on this is on Facebook, be careful what you like, what you comment on. Don't say too much. You don't even have to like my post. Just please be aware, because this is for my friends, of course. Just take my word for it. And it wasn't very long afterwards that this company, Cambridge Analytica, got exposed that they were massively behind Donald Trump's election. And I'm not pro or against the politicians. I don't actually like any of them. And also the whole Brexit thing was driven, the social media campaign, the advertising campaign was driven by Cambridge Analytica. But you know what was interesting for me even more than that was one of the senior directors, I think he may have been even the CEO, was also at some point the chief editor of a newspaper called Breitbart News. And David Bannon is far right, extreme right advisor for Donald Trump. My point is this: even the simplest posts on various social media platforms tells these people what kind of person you are, because they're able, based on the very bare minimum, like you mentioned, the language, they're able to manipulate, or like you said, have a set of slides for you to see, to be able to then sell their core message. Sorry, I'm here just, I'm not here to lecture you or anything
No,
like
it's
that.
true. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
100%.
sharing with my audience. So talk to me about propaganda and when it's misused, because we want to talk about how you can use it correctly.
I don't even know if there's a good side of propaganda. I don't know. I don't like a propaganda as a noun. I've never maybe I've got too many negative associations with it for me to be like there's a positive side to it. Yeah, propaganda is a big word. I don't know if I can conquer that. But generally speaking, what I would love for people to start discerning, really and truly, figuring out where we've been, and I say we as like me too, have been caught out by believing that the country we happen to reside in is just right, is the goodie. Because it can't be that everyone in the world just perceives their country to be a goodie, but it is true. And that's done really methodically. And I feel like that's something people are waking up to now, slowly but surely. I think people, when they think about propaganda, they think about that Uncle Sam poster of like, we want you or whatever. But it's actually much bigger than that. It's every movie you've ever seen where the American is like the goodie and is giving people liberation in some weird country that they made up that looks weirdly like orientalist and throwbacky to like all of those like Terminator movies where all the baddies are like Russian, like, or like even Stranger Things now where like the baddies are also somehow Russian but the goodies are always like, it's all very to get you at different stages of your life to perceive that it's okay, you're with the goodies. Like and also like that soothes a thing inside of us, right? Of like, I'm not the drama, I'm not part of the drama, I'm helping. But you have to just believe that everyone in the world is perceiving that of their own place to a certain extent. And that's the way language is crafted. That's literally the way media entertainment has been crafted, no matter where you are. If like, from Long Live the Queen and celebrating all of these wonderful things to do with heritage of the place that you're in, right down to what you see in school. It's a very on purpose, very self-soothing practice for a lot of the people who just perpetuate those messages to continue to believe that their wherever they are is the goodie. That's to me is like the main objective of propaganda, right? Because if you buy into that notion, then you're able to be pacified by a lot of actions that the state that you happen to reside in would take, right? And that's what we're seeing now. But the problem then comes when, again, we see our country acting as a baddie, portraying itself as a goodie in as many words as it can by concealing some things. But as you've mentioned, the mask has come off because we get to see a global rendition, and it may not even be press, it's just people's first person perspective. And it's enough to make us go, wait a second, maybe that's not all. Like, maybe this isn't the be all and end all. Because again, it's a double-edged thing of like, I want to self-soothe. I want it to be the easy thing of I want it to be like not my responsibility to have to stand up and use my voice and and get involved in global politics, and geopolitics shouldn't affect me. I just have to believe we're doing the right. Like, it's a very easy sell, right? Silence is pacifying people is a very good, easy sell. But there comes a point where humanity has to override that. And that's what is happening now. So I don't know if I've answered the question of like propaganda, but that's the thing people are becoming more astute to, I believe, right? What we're seeing is a consequence of people going, hold on a minute, maybe the place I'm in is the baddie. And what that means is we're having to undo decades of brainwashing and call it brainwashing. And that takes a lot of humility as an adult, which is why the younger someone is, the less they have to contend with, because there's just less brainwash. They've had less time to be brainwashed by all of these like mainstream media outlets. Whereas the younger someone is, the more they're like, I can see it, it's there. Like, I don't have a lot to undo. I just go, that's the problem. We're the problem. That's it right there. Doesn't matter what you say, because it's very clear. So yeah, you can really see how people have been worn down by messaging over the years. And again, all you had to go off was language, like really and truly. And headlines is what you had to go off, in some images, but they select those very, very on purpose.
It's easy to lose sight, though. Although, but first of all, propaganda, the word, is still being used in Southern American countries as a way to describe marketing. They still call it propaganda. And the term coined by Edwin Bernays, who's the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and it's very deep psychological based. And I think what's happened is it's broken up, splintered up. First of all, they stopped calling it propaganda because of the connotations that you just mentioned. They called it marketing and public relations. And so there's two elements to it, though, because I think marketing is not a bad thing, is letting people know you exist. It's not an issue. We have to let people know we exist if we're trying to make a living, whether it be personal branding or corporate branding. That's not an issue. The propaganda element is dissemination of information, of which there's a bunch of truths, and then you pepper in the deceits, the lies. And this is what is happening right now as we speak. There's a lot of dissemination of truth. I want to give a couple of examples here that years ago, the royal family of this country, prior to World War I, were called Saxe, Coburg, Gotha, German names because they're descendants of Germans. But the reason they changed it was because of World War I, and then later on World War II, they called themselves the House of Windsor. They changed the name simply because their original names doesn't quite resonate with the general public. So name changing is taking place all the time. Now, as a copywriter, it's interesting that for me, although I'm experienced in copywriting, I don't do it full time like you. It's one of those most amazing topics that isn't talked about at school. I don't know how many students at the age of 14, 15, 16 even have a clue that copywriting is such a thing. And yet from movie trailers to adverts to presentations is all ultimately based in copywriting. So what kind of responsibility does a copywriter like yourself and other copywriters have in disseminating accurate information as opposed to propaganda?
I can only answer this as a person of faith, because the moral, that's a moral question. is really and truly like the basis of my answer could only be moral. Because like if your gauge of success is monetary, nothing's off limits. So therefore, you could, to a certain extent, justify a certain skew of the truth. You could do it because the implicitness with which you could manipulate people could be slight enough that the payoff would be worth it. It's a very gray area. But because I personally don't deem monetary success as the ultimate success, I'm very happy to forego many a verb and noun choice and like positioning and messaging framework that would, to a certain extent, deceive, right? But having that expertise or having this lens that I've got, because again, like I don't see a sentence the way other people see a sentence. It's just the truth of it. Like, and it's a very achievable thing. That's what I want everyone to know. Like the lens that I have is a very achievable lens that you can get by reading maybe 3-4 books and watching some YouTube videos. But anyways, the idea that I could manipulate someone with words is such a frightening, damning part morally to me that I err on the side of caution all the time. Like but for me again, I'm saying this to someone of faith. It's a very easy decision to make. I'm going to pick honesty every time, and I know where people don't, and I know where people manipulate you, and I know where people hide the truth. And I want to add one thing where you said that people sometimes sprinkle in like deceit. One of the worst kinds of deceit is just masking the truth. Like and that's a very easy. It's a very easy thing to do, and that's also like a thing that I contend with in copywriting. Like if a company has had some kind of consistent failure or is actually some kind of danger to it associated with its product, I wouldn't work with them. It is the truth, because I wouldn't know how to draw in more customers or draw in more clientele knowing that they pose a risk to themselves if they use the product.
Both of us are Muslims, and Western history says that Islam was spread with a sword in one hand, the Quran in the other. Actually, it was through trading, and especially the trade. Well, I say especially the ones that stick to my mind are the stories I hear about when they went to the Far East and places like India. And one of the reasons people became Muslims is simply because of the blatant honesty. Even the act of using measuring scales, they didn't cheat you. And that was like, wow, well, why are you doing that? Well, because of exactly what you said. And I'll say it, we are accountable to God. As Muslims, we believe that we are accountable to God, and every lie, every deceit we do, we are accountable for that. And it's very easy to be economical with the truth. Well, it's actually, yeah, it is easy to be economical with the truth because of survival reasons. So this is why you've got to be a lot more conscious about the truth and spelling out the truth. Like right now, I've got an old Audi which needs fixing. So an Audi convertible looks beautiful, but I've figured out, okay, once I've got it fixed, I'm going to sell it. I thought, what should I be doing as a Muslim? Well, actually, I will mention that it's an old Audi. It is a gas guzzler, and I want a smaller car, and this is why I'm selling it. People want to know. And if no one buys, no one buys. It'll sit on the driveway. Not a problem. I'm not trying to be some kind of perfect, idealistic guy or anything. It's just that morally, it would be bankrupt of me because of the standards. The standards is not money, just like how you said. The people you work with are NGOs, business organizations, and you help them communicate information. If somebody's running a business, they're going to have a lot of competitors in the marketplace. There are a few monopolies around, but I'm guessing most of your customers, your clients, will be operating in competitive markets. They are used to seeing people being economical to the truth, people exaggerating benefits and underplaying the weaknesses. How possible is it for them to actually grow their business or sustain their business through honesty and integrity?
Firstly, it depends on the business. So I'm going to talk about my clients. And the reason I say this is because as a freelancer, I am very privileged in that I can say no to lots of briefs and clients. And that's a wonderful thing, because I used to work in conglomerates where that wasn't the case. I may be able to say no on a personal basis, but I can't say no on a departmental basis. So I know at the end of the day, someone's paying my paycheck and I don't agree with the business ethics. So it differs for every business model. But and I want to be very honest with that, right? And I don't mess with those. Like where I believe there may be a gray area, I just won't I'll just steer clear. It's the easiest thing to do for me. And yeah, and that's just my stance. When it comes to my clients, there's always a truth in their mission. There's like, and I say this like with the utmost earnestness. So tactically speaking, if we're going to talk about tactics, the tactic I always implement is understand your competitive landscape, understand your messaging, understand your positioning based on understanding your audience. So you have to first of all understand what on earth, who would even, then what they use in the place of the benefit you're providing now, and then how those people describe themselves. But then you must come up with this wonderful thing called differentiation. And that is usually your truth. That's as varied as the founder story to the specific way that they implement AI to their ethical trading model, right down to like the training that the people have had, right? So it's a varied plethora of unique selling points that you just have to understand if they resonate with the specific audience once you've understood the product benefit according to them. And again, we're selling product benefits. We're not selling anything other than that, right? And it just has to be a sincere benefit. That's like one of my criteria for all of my clients. And again, I'm very privileged in that I'm able to say no. And I understand that's not everyone's case. So if you are able to say no, and you have a business where you genuinely believe in your product benefit, it is your job to do your due diligence in your competitive landscape and understand where you fit in. So a good way to understand this is the thing that is, I've said some keywords here, messaging and positioning, right? So messaging is just the words you use to make a certain thing land. It may not necessarily be the copywriting of the actual phrasing of the words, but it's the general way that the place that it takes up in your head, and the positioning is the exact like pinpoint in your brain. So what I mean by that is, if I now tell you where would you find music, you could say Spotify. So Spotify is in the postcode in your brain where you go, I could find new music here. But they never say like you're going to find all of the new music here. They say something like discover this artist or whatever. That's their copywriting. But their messaging that they want you to understand is this is the place that you go to discover your new favorite artist. So that's what their messaging framework is. Their positioning is this exact thing in your head because they've taken up that space of music equals Spotify, music equals Spotify, music equals Spotify. That's what they're doing. And if you now want to put this really practically, again, maybe using the idea of Spotify, is they're trying to reposition currently, I don't know if anyone's seen this, to podcasts are here too, and audiobooks, which is actually a very difficult thing to, because they're moving that pinpoint in your head. Because you used to say music, and now you have to say audiobooks, and now you also have to say podcasts. So it's actually quite a specific messaging, and the way they can do that really is just by words and pictures. Again, that's the only tools they have. They have words and pictures, and the background of that is an audience analysis. So how do like Google Podcasts do it? How do Apple Podcasts do it? Where do they live? And therefore, what is special about this? Is the thing that is special is that you can also get your music here, etc. So you have to do the same due diligence for your business. Understand the benefit, understand the audience, because those two things are not separate at all. They're the same to a certain extent. And then understand the words and the verbs that would trigger that, which is your wording, and then your messaging and your positioning is all of this stuff.
Can you distinguish what you mean by feature and benefit? Because they're very, very different things.
A feature is like, let's say this thing, right? Let's say a feature is that this band is made of some kind of material, let's call it like UHV, right? And let's say this is a very special material, UHV, and it's got these sustainable, I don't know, things and all of this stuff. I, to a certain extent, don't care. But if you tell me it's easy to hold, that's the benefit. So the feature is like, we spent hours figuring out this UHV material and it's shiny and I don't care. I just care that I can walk around with it now. So that's the benefit. And again, that benefit will be different to everyone else. So to someone else, they may care about the benefit of this lowers your carbon footprint. To someone else, they may care that actually this is really good for like neuroplasticity, to understand, like, right, if I'm trying to give this to a kid, right? So the benefit is very different to the feature. The benefit is what I get out of it. Sometimes it is as easy as like ease. Sometimes if you get very good at it, it is just a feeling. That's the long and short of it. A lot of the times, the main product feature is so irrelevant because it's the feeling that we are selling, not the benefit necessarily. It's the feeling
So
of the benefit.
ultimately, people are buying the feeling
100%.
rather than the logic and rationale. And it's interesting because I've had people who are engineers and scientists that I've worked with many, many years, and ultimately they also realize, despite any kind of decision they make to take action, might be buy something. I actually used to say this. I say to customers, look, they'd say something like, "Give me lots of information.
Yeah.
Give me more information on this." And I said, "Look, I can give you a barrel loads of information, but until you tap into your own feelings, you will never make a decision. So I'm not going to give you any."
Yeah.
So it's the feelings that we're selling.
It's honestly and truly, people are buying feelings. They're not really buying much more than that. A new dress is nice, but it's the feeling you get of a new dress.
And this is why television ads, for example, car ads, actually don't focus on the features. They focus on the dreamy landscape, depending on what kind of car you're buying, of course, and to conjure up the feelings rather than talk about all the intimate details of a car, which nobody really cares about except maybe a few guys. Keeping that in mind, then, how can our listeners, our viewers, be a lot more discerning when their feelings are being triggered in a good way versus feelings being provoked to get them to do something in a negative way?
Annoyingly, I think it starts with self-awareness. It's going to be down to you, but the thing that you are contending with is that copywriters, journalists, whoever's putting this message out in front of you, know that they know, they don't think, they know that we are perceiving messages in something called like the first brain, like your first gear, where like you're just susceptible to believing loads of things. You're not discerning all the time. That would be exhausting.
Mm.
So that's why I don't know if it's helpful to say you must be discerning at all times. It's a general awareness that we could have that any words that we are going to perceive have been picked on purpose. Have, like, the best word is curated. They haven't been selected. It's a curation of words, just as a gallery is a curated piece of art, right? In general, like it's in itself is a piece of curation. Every single word advert along with an image has been curated for you. As soon as you are aware of that fact, specifically to do with headlines, you start perceiving, or you start having a value judgment on your perception. That would be, I think that's the initial leap. So before we even go to like, is this triggering me? Is this not? La, da, da. Just be aware that you should, at minimum, have a value judgment on your like reaction to these words. If you find yourself reading something and being livid at someone, like angry at someone, know that that's what it was made to do. If you read an advert and go, I can't wait to, know that that was what was intended. If you walk past a shop and it says sale ending soon, and you go, oh, I've got to go in there quickly, I can't miss that. That's what that's intended to do. It's picked on purpose to get a rise out of you. Negative, positive, up to you to discern within yourself, right? Because what makes me mad is not what makes you mad. What makes me act is not what makes you act. Yeah, it's exhausting to always be in the discerning part. So just know that you are able to have a value judgment on your reaction, which doesn't take too much. Like, what are they trying to get at? Like, you don't have to go to the depths I go to. Just do a first level of like, okay, sit with it for a bit. Don't make a rash decision. Sit with it for a bit, see what happens.
There's a shop called Next in the UK, of course. It's clothing, and they do home goods as well. And I remember going back way back in time, I don't know if they still exist, a off-season Next clothing sold in a shop called Next to Nothing. I remember once, so Next to Nothing and Next jeans might be, I don't know, 40, 50 pounds. Next to Nothing, you get it at 15, 20 pounds. I remember one day rushing into that store, Next to Nothing, and there was a sale sign, which I read in my brain. It said closing down sale. So I went in, I spent a heck of a lot of money. And then when I got out, I looked at the sign again. It said clothing down sale. So we have a ability to skip letters and read what we want to read and get basically pulled in to do stuff because we are confirmation bias, right? To me, I was thinking, okay, it was closing down, so I didn't read the words properly. What thoughts do you have as a copywriter with that kind of language?
Oh, I mean, that's quite clever, isn't it? That's just, I've got to, like, the ROI on that spend of copywriting must have been through the roof. But
Yeah,
then you just go, like, that, this is what I mean about the gray area of like, could this be? And then you go, oh, that's personal responsibility. And you go, but you set the trap. So yeah, so it's just something that you have to contend with as a copywriter. Like, are you okay with with doing that? But it is quite clever. Like, again, and also when you say it in hindsight, it sounds almost trivial, where you go, well, why didn't you just read it? But again, you're not dealing with the you that is
watch.
like going through, like, I don't know how else we shop for other stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not us doing like a price comparison. It's us just walking daily, doing whatever it is, and then going, oh, I've got 10 minutes. Let's go into this because otherwise it's clothing down. So like, they're getting you in a very different frame of mind. And again, this is just what they know of you. They know that you're not switched on all the time. They know. I know. So I just have to tell you that the message simply, effectively, and to the thing that just sells you the benefit. Because you don't care about anything else. You care about you. You literally just care about you. That's us.
I don't believe that was an unethical thing for them to do because they literally spelt out what it said.
Yeah.
And I took the action. I actually said my reaction was the same as you, actually. That's so clever of them. I wasn't
Yeah.
angry with them, and I liked the clothes anyway. And but taking you back to one point, the whole point of my podcast series generally has been for the last few years is actually taking personal responsibility and
Yeah.
self-awareness and understanding where you're getting triggered, being mindful of your emotions and mindful of your reactions and trigger points. It was interesting, or it still is interesting, when I hear people complain about certain corporations. So I mentioned about KitKat. I used to love KitKat, but then I heard about the CEO of KitKat, not KitKat, sorry, Nestle, who make KitKat, saying that they don't believe water is a human right. People should have to pay for water, and a lot of people got turned off there. And I've seen videos again a long time ago saying he's the most evil man on the earth. The point is this: these companies exist because we're the ones who do the buying. If you
Yeah.
don't like a product, if everyone stops buying KitKat, or everybody who doesn't like what's going on, let's say a significant portion, 20% of the population stops buying KitKat, they're going to have to do something about KitKat. But we're seeing this with Starbucks, we're seeing this with McDonald's. So we do actually have the power. I don't think we're victims. I think what we've done is literally abdicates our responsibility and our actions. How do you get to deeply understand your customer, the people you're dealing with? How do you deeply get to understand them in a way that you can convey a message which leads to action, meaning sales results, and also convey it in a way almost as effectively as the negative stuff, but actually gets them to take action in an ethical way, I would say.
Okay, here's my general feedback on the stance of that question. Implicitly in it is that negative action is an action. Actually, the best action, and just think about this like strategically. If I was doing something awful, if I was doing something awful and I just needed to continue to do that awful thing, your only job is to do nothing. That's your only job. So my only job is to get you to believe that this is none of your business, or that this is out of your hand anyways. Or like, I'm in the right. Best case scenario is I'm in the right. That's the best case scenario. Like, if I can get you to believe that my awful action is actually a good thing, that's ideal. But really and truly, all I need you to do, I don't even need your support. I just need your passive self. So when we say we're not victims, to a certain extent, that is true, but we are victims to our own laziness. That's really
Yeah,
what it is. It's
yeah.
do we, because also with action comes a risk. With inaction, there is no risk if you think about it. I'm just doing no stuff. That's how bad things happen historically, because all it takes is for us to not even condone it, just say nothing.
Mm.
Right? So that's the truth of doing badness. And again, if we're going to take it back to faith, that's why there's many hadiths about your job is to uphold justice. That is a very serious responsibility, which necessarily comes at risking self. And if you have the safety to risk yourself, then it is your duty. It's just called a duty. So there's that. Now, as a copywriter, knowing this, the first thing I can do is the thing I've tried to do, which is educate people, where I go, this is all they need from you. All they need from you is no action. So, because the first step of changing anything is awareness of the situation. Then you go, necessarily, that means that your job is to act. Should you be on the side of justice, necessarily that means that that is your job. And again, if we're using the framework of like that we've been seen before, it's not my framework, it's just how do you uphold justice? The first is you do an action. The second is you speak about it. And then the last thing, if you have no safety to do any of that, is you believe it. Right?
Yeah.
So there's just 3 steps to upholding justice. Now, the first one is boycott. And we know that's useful. We know that's useful because they have an entire, I think it's like an embassy, not an embassy, like an entire thing to stop boycott, divestment, and sanctions, like
Yeah.
to stop it. So then you go, not an embassy, what is it called? Like a
Department?
internal, yeah, like it's a department.
It's interesting. If boycotts didn't work, then the US government and UK are trying to prevent boycotting of a certain country that won't even be named. You know who you are.
Yeah, I don't mind naming them. It's like but I just don't know based on what you said about. But I don't know your perception of the algorithm. I don't think that
Yeah,
stops us.
the YouTube algorithm is, let's put it this way, not always in our favor. If I was to summarize some of what you just said, and I think it's important people understand, actually, I believe inaction is a form of action in the
Yeah,
sense that
yeah.
if you are seeing evil taking place, so I go around the street, the general attitude is if there 2 people get into a fight, or man and woman get into a fight, there could be a couple, everyone will get the cameras out, of course. Me, I'm the guy who will be intervening at the risk of my own life because you never know, because sometimes the 2 can turn against you. But if you're watching somebody get hurt and damaged and you're too busy just observing or pretending it's not happening, if you don't have a God, I'm sure you're going to have a problem with it. But for us as Muslims, it would be like, we're accountable.
Mm.
We're accountable. This is why the Muslim people of the world, when they see injustice, at least on a relatively large scale, everybody feels it.
Mm.
And I think people also need to be aware, because the Muslim community is getting bigger, and more importantly, it's getting more knowledgeable. The generation now, so the youngsters in the 20s and the 30s, are way more knowledgeable than, say, my generation was, because they seek to learn, and of course they've got the internet. And so one thing to understand about Muslim community is we don't believe it ends at the grave. We believe it actually only begins. This is the beginning. And so if you're working with a Muslim community, they know their actions they are accountable for. What bothers me growing up in the United Kingdom, and I'm changing this podcast form a bit, because this is for, I've got thousands of friends who know me really well, and I really don't care outsiders if they don't know it. Well, I grew up baffled that when I go to the mosque, we are in total surrender to God. When you do sajda, it's like we're saying we're not worthy. We're literally saying we are not worthy relative to the magnitude of God and creation and all that kind of stuff. We say it in a few words, of course, and it's the most peaceful place I know. I've been to churches, I've been to gurdwaras, Hindu temples, you name it. Not been in the synagogue, but what used to really not wind me up, but get me saddened, was how people are so hostile towards mosques. In England, forget about other countries, I'm talking about in this country. I lived in Sunderland for 6 years of my life throughout the teens. And I heard people, there was only one mosque there. They built a few since then. And the far right in this country are complaining about all these mosques. I'm thinking, all these places of peace, you don't like that? And yet the most violent people back in those days were the football fans. Why aren't you shutting those places down? The point is this: these whispers are propaganda. When we see some evil taking place at a local level or international level, it's hard to say, because this, we get shut down, of course, when you go on social media. Well, don't go on social media, talk to people around you. What we need to eliminate from this planet is eliminate hate, not bring more love, because I think everybody is loving naturally by nature of the creation. Everyone's by nature loving. It's the hatred. The hatred comes from fear. The fear comes from ignorance. Ignorance comes from not knowing, not researching, not understanding, and then believing any crap people tell you.
It's an easy message to sell, and it sells. So it's for the good of a state to have an enemy, like a scapegoat. My best case scenario, let's say, okay, I need to do some kind of bad thing. And I would love to be able to point to someone and be like, but this is actually the reason for the crumbling of society, not me. My best case scenario is that you're able to pinpoint the crumbling of society down to a visual. So the easiest thing to do is pick someone that looks different to the majority. So the easiest thing to do is look for the people who look different to the majority, and then just be like, ugh. Now, the thing with us is that if it's a simple message, we'll just take it on board. We won't question too much. Because the more difficult thing would be to be like, but surely they're just humans with hijabs on. That would be the more difficult thing. Like, you'd have to do many steps of logical deduction, but they're not getting us in discerning brain. They're getting us in first brain, right? They're getting us in that. Just tell me what you need me to know and I'll move on, right? This is the person who's causing my troubles. They're backwards. They don't like the stuff I like. So therefore they're awful. Done. Like, I trust you because you give me free health care and all of this stuff. Forget all of the bad stuff you do to me. There's some good redeeming qualities. So therefore, it's in my best interest to believe who you believe is the baddie is the baddie. And it's very clear who they perceive the baddie to be at any one time, because you can see it with words and images, all of this stuff. So strategically speaking, it makes sense for every country to have a baddie. Like, that's just how it works. And we just happen to be in a place where, like, it's easy to point us out, and it's easy to put a message across, because as you said, it comes from ignorance. So again, it's a very simple deduction of how come this, and then you just go, I just work backwards. You need to accomplish this goal. As a place of governance, you need to accomplish this goal. You need a scapegoat. Who do you pick? Who do they not know enough about, and just is on the peripheries enough? And there's enough of them that you can use them as a scapegoat, and you like, and it's fine. Like, it's just a good target. Like, is the truth. So then I go, I understand 100% how, if you had never come across a Muslim, your perception can only be negative. Like, in this here UK, I would argue that it literally cannot. Like, I would struggle to believe that you could have a positive perception just based on what you see and how everything is painted, and abroad, and how they paint abroad, and like, it would be very, you would have to have done a lot of reading outside of mainstream messaging to perceive someone in a positive light who you haven't met, and the only ever time you hear about them is negative. That's the truth, right? So then I go, there's only so much I could be like, oh, you're a fool, because it's designed for you to fall for it. So all you've done is be human. All they've done is manipulated you. It's designed this way. It's like, why is it so easy for a toddler to use a phone? Are they a genius? No, it's designed to be that easy. That's the thing by design. There's no value judgment on the toddler using it. Everything is in the creation of it, because they've understood human psychology. They've understood the stuff that would rile you up. They've understood the stuff that would get you to be passive. They've understood it all because they have loads of history to go off of. They do it down to a science.
We have, sorry about interrupting, we have these images of boats full of refugees going through the waves in the English Channel, going through the rocky waves. And we see that on the news quite often. Rarely do we see images of brown colored surgeons and nurses and black people operating on someone's brain or someone's heart. And yet the national health system in the UK, is a significant portion not the majority, a significant portion of the geniuses doing the operations are of color or Muslim. Not all of them are Muslim, but certainly a significant portion. We rarely see images associated with that. So let's talk about individuals who are trying to run a business. I'll use me as an example. My main income generator, twofold. One is the health business. So people with diabetes, mental health, which is holistic health, basically. And then the other one is a professional speaker teaching leadership or personal responsibility and confidence building to young people. What are the questions I've got to ask myself to produce the best content so I can message correctly to the people who hire me? So in this case, leaders at schools.
Okay, we're gonna do just one of them because the
Yeah,
messaging that you'd have to do is very separate for both of them, right?
correct.
So if we're gonna go for the school one, like where we are teaching senior like or leadership skills, right?
Mm,
That's the thing. So we're
yeah,
teaching leadership skills and the methodology is up to you.
yeah.
But if we wanted to get the messaging correct, first and foremost, I would narrow down so hard on your best case scenario for a target audience. Like who, if they heard your message, do you believe, but and this is based on aspiration as well as like anecdotal real life evidence, you could change the trajectory of their life?
Mm,
That's your first question. Like what did they look like? What school
mm,
do they go to? What postcode are they in? How old are their parents? Like all of this stuff around them, because then you know the way that they would perceive you. That would naturally come to you. It should at this point, because you've done this for a while. And then you go, okay, what's their influential circle? Because
mm,
chances are they're that person whose life you want to, based on the service I'm understanding you're providing, they won't be the decision maker to
no,
monetarily compensate you for whatever it is. So then you go, fabulous. Now that I've understood the product benefit for the person, I now have to understand it for the decision maker around them. Then you have to know everything about the decision maker and their perception of your audience, like the target audience. And
mm,
then you have to understand the role that they believe they play and the benefit they would bring should you be in the circle. And then you have to message it that way. So let's say you found that your ideal audience is every single Bengali 15-year-old boy in Tower Hamlets. Then
mm,
you go, actually, then therefore it's the faculty in every single school in Tower Hamlets that I need to influence. Then you say, okay, fabulous. What's the ways that I can reach them? And it could be a geo-targeted campaign on socials. It could be going to them face to face, whatever it might be, or some TikToks. And then you go, this is the messaging of like, if you want, because you have to get into the brain of the
mm,
person who's doing the decision making. If you're there to help, there's someone who wants to help you help, right?
mm,
Something like that. Let's say you want to help change someone's trajectory of their life. This is a proven way to do it, etc., etc., etc. And then you'd have to message and position yourself in a way based on however it is you deliver your message. I would say you have to couple that understanding, because that's your messaging, with a really, really, really good understanding of your competitive landscape. Let's say you're not the only one providing the service for 15-year-olds. Let's say that's monetarily, that's not very sustainable. So actually you need to go wider. You need to go to like Islamic leadership. Then you'd be like, okay, fabulous. If I were to Google now, Islamic leadership program, who's providing the top notch and how do I perceive that it's top notch without having attended? How
mm,
do I perceive that it's top notch? How have I understood that this is the upper echelon? Is it they've gone with clout? Is it that they've gone with branding? Is it that they've gone with like a specific name to get buy-in? Is it that they've gone with reputation? Is it that they've gone with geography? Is it that they've gone with case studies? Whatever it is. And then you go, what is actually the thing I bring to the table that is completely different to all of these service providers? And then you position yourself as such on a wider scale.
wow, wow. So it's so amazing that it's very scientific in terms of detail you go into. So let's say I've got highly ethical, integral, professional speaker or any other business who wants to work with you. How do they get in touch with you?
With me personally,
Yeah, you.
oh, just the royal you. I'm the only Safana Manajid in the world. So if you know how to
Right.
spell my first name and my last name, and you Google me, you'll end up on something called safana.co.uk, which is just my website.
Uh-huh.
And you can just send me a message, and it's very easy.
Being a copywriter myself, I do strongly urge anybody who has an ethical message, meaning whatever your message is, whatever your product is, you're working along the lines of ethics, morals, and you want it to be influential. I've interviewed, or I've at least mixed with top people in the copywriting world, marketing world, without any hesitation. Get in touch with Safana. No two ways about it.
Oh,
Safana, is there
great.
any final message you want to share? A message of hope regarding language for our listeners and our viewers?
That's a difficult one, but I do think we should take solace in the young, we call them younger generation, but just people who haven't been subject to a lot of mainstream media give me a lot of hope, because mainstream media is really an all it's used for a lot of badness in the end. So those who have not been subject to it give me a lot of hope. A lot of the younger Muslims give me a lot of hope. Yeah, that's a big question, but just generally speaking, I hope that I could fill you with the hope that I'm filled with. I don't have a choice really to be anything but optimistic as a Muslim. I genuinely believe that it's not just going to be fine, it's going to be divine.
Absolutely beautiful point to end this episode of the Harun Rabbani podcast. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. Make sure you share this and do get in touch with Safana if you feel you've got a business that needs help, which is basically most businesses, by the way. Safana, thank you once again for joining the podcast. Bye for now, everybody. And assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.